It's a trap. Meta. And Konami is setting it as we speak. Konami is pushing us into a future trap meta. And I know for many of you out there, it's a little scary. But for the players who have been keeping up with the metagame, we will note that we have not had a trap metagame for quite some time. Honestly, probably last time was Paleo or even the Outledge. So it has been a minute. And since then, we've just been seeing combo decks run crazy with their powerhouse spell cards and all their monster boards. But Konami said, enough is enough. And we are going back to the purple cards. And for many older players, I know that kind of sounds like normal, because when you go into GOAT format or even the Edison format, you will remember just how powerful trap cards were. They were pretty much the make it or break it in the entirety of the game, and you had to really watch out for things like the Mare Force. But in the most modern versions of Yu-Gi-Oh, these traps are just non-existent, and pretty much all traps in general are not there. And the only type of trap that you would be running into as of recently is a hand trap like Ash Blossom, which isn't a trap card at all. And this is kind of the interactions that we've been seeing time and time again. Ash Blossom, Effect Veiler, and the single trap we've actually seen in ages that activates from the hand and is the reason why it's used is Infinite Impermanence. And up until recently, this is pretty much the go-to trap card that any deck was playing, only because it could be used on the first turn. And now we can actually say that this is some of the hype around things like Evenly Matched and why this card is actually still used in the metagame. But as of recently, traps have kind of fallen off unless you're playing things like Labyrinth. And then even then, you had to have the newer age trap cards like Karma Cannon or even things like the Simultaneous Equation Cannon that have to have crazy effects just to potentially keep up with the current metagame. That is, until the Dominus is. And now we have Dominus Purge as well as Dominus Impulse. And ever since their release, they have been making quite the impact on the current meta game. And even though we did mention on our last video about the current trap meta, they have announced the newest Dominus card, and that is Psalms of the King. If your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, you get to negate that effect and then add one Dominus card from the deck to your hand. And now, unlike the other Dominuses that cut you off of half monster effects, this trap card cuts you off of all monster effects. So do keep that in mind. And this is why a lot of players are kind of on the theorizing list that more Dominus support will be coming out. Potentially even some that summon beefy monsters that might even have some effects. So definitely keep that in mind. But some players have already been anticipating this future trap meta, not only with the Dominuses, but with cards like Silhouette Rabbit, which ever since its release, players have been using this as their final link to on the field to set a free Solemn Warning directly from the deck, which is actually the Angel statue as a rune. And then not only has Konami already released some support, but they have been hinting heavily at the trap meta. With the newest May set that is set to release later on this year, we see from the cover art alone that we are definitely getting Odeon support. And with players who are familiar with Odeon from the original anime, he is the OG trap player, where all of his cards were trap cards. And it also seems we're getting a retrain of Temple of the Kings, which for the players that played back then, you remember how broken that was. And the Odeon support alone has players hyped with cards like the Silhouette Rabbit, because we are actually kind of assuming that you're going to be able to set multiple copies of Odeon support directly from the deck, because the Silhouette Rabbit sets traps that can be summoned as monsters, and the majority of Odeon's traps could be summoned as monsters as well. So that's why we've seen an increase in Silhouette's price, and it'll probably go up even more. But probably most exciting to the trap fans out there are the Outledge players, and that's because with the newest support announced by Konami, we're seeing insane boosts to the Outledge deck. In the top 10 cards to be picking up for Supreme Darkness, we mentioned at the end the Delta of Invitation Field Spell, which is insane for the Outledge deck. Not only does it send the Outledge, but it allows you to revive it by using the field spell, and the field spell returns back to your hand, so you can use it over and over again. But we also saw they're getting a new continuous trap, as well as Fusion Monster. And now, that Fusion Monster is insane, being able to summon an Outledge from anywhere, just by simply summoning him by sending one of your light zombies to the grave if you already have the Golden Lord on board. And then the continuous trap card allows you to summon it as a normal monster, and then you can return a monster on the field of the hand if you already have Outledge, or you can set your golden lands and elixirs from the banished zone. So we're seeing all sorts of support to multiple trap card archetypes and even some new ones with the Dominuses. So many players are hyped up. So you might not want to use the Dominuses with the Eldritch because you would actually not be able to use the Golden Lord's ability. But we're seeing cards like Silohap Rabbit will probably be very useful when you're seeing the new Odeon support. And then not only that, but since the Dominuses do not like activating monster effects, it would actually be interesting to see the Primite variant decks mix and mingle with that of the Dominus or even the Eldritch deck. Because all the Eldritch trap monsters that summon themselves to the monster board are considered normal. So you can actually tech out the deck with the Primite support and have all their powerful tech cards like the Drill Beam or the Lordly Load. And I do not believe Konami is going to stop there. They saw very few traps make it through like the simultaneous equation cannons or even the Daruma destructive karma cannon, and only used by things like Labyrinth, where cards like Infinite Impermanence or Evenly Matched, those are the mainstays that are actually played in a variety of decks. And I think Konami has realized that if you're going to have traps in the metagame, they need to be activated from the hand, because the only hand traps we were having interactions with were monsters. And I think Konami actually understood this, because even at their official tournaments, the casters were actually not able to call Ash Blossom and Effect Veiler hand traps, but instead hand interactions. And I do believe a lot of that was because Konami knew they were coming out with this new type of trap that was an actual hand trap. And again, up until now, the only ones you saw were Evenly Matched and Infinite Impermanence, and that was it. And honestly, I do believe Konami is actually going to be focusing on this actual hand trap interaction for the future of their trap game. And that is a lot of the time because we see that by the time you're actually able to use traps on like turn 2 or turn 3, they're not very usable anymore. And if you're playing traps out of your hand as a going second player, your next turn is not going to start as powerful because you already used some of your resources to block the opponent from playing as well. So I do believe we're going to be seeing more hand trap interactions, whether that's effects like Bottomless, Torrential, potentially things like a Mare Force. Who knows? Honestly, I am personally hoping for a quick interaction card like Pot of Prosperity that even during your opponent's turn while they're playing, it allows you to add consistency from your deck to your hand, maybe add things like Ash Blossom or Nibiru that will cut down what your opponent is actually allowed to do because they saw you add an all-important interruption directly to your hand. So honestly, I could see Konami kind of sprinkling a little love in that direction of allowing you to play traps during your opponent's first turn to either hinder them or add consistency for your following turn. And honestly, I know a lot of players might not be too happy to see Konami dedicate to the purple card, but for the OG players out there, I think it's refreshing to see Konami actually have that third card type be represented in the game, where for quite some time it was basically just Infinite Impermanence and Evenly Matched, and that was a little dry. But I do believe, especially with the new Dominus archetype coming out, as well as things like the Eldritch or Odeon support, we're going to be seeing traps return their way back into the metagame of Yu-Gi-Oh! And if you want to see how some decks like Primite Eldritch work, we'll probably be testing them here on the channel, so definitely be checking that out. But if you want to be picking up the cards before they go up in price, definitely check out the top 10 cards to be picking up from Supreme Darkness so you are ahead of the metagame. But most importantly, guys, stay safe, have a good night, and suck it, nerds.